Okay, I think that we are going to get started. Now I want to make sure we can cover all of the great information that we're able to cover. So good afternoon and welcome all. My name is Kirsten Slaughter and I'm the Membership Engagement Director here at Wisconsin Farmers Union. Thank you for joining us today for the WFU and DATCP co-sponsored webinar on Bridging the Gap, Connecting Farm to School. Today, we will be covering multiple layers of the farm institution route, and we hope that this information is valuable to everyone involved in food procurement, from farmers to local food suppliers to schools and other local institutions. Wisconsin Farmers Union is a member-driven organization committed to enhancing the quality of life for family farmers, rural communities, and all people through educational opportunities, cooperative endeavors, and civic engagement. We know that farm to school is an issue that has been ongoing and increasing in interest for WFU members, and so we're very excited that today we'll be able to really dig into this topic. Also wanted to let you know that DATCP is also co-sponsoring this event, and the DATCP mission is to partner with all citizens of Wisconsin to grow the economy by promoting quality food, healthy plants and animals, sound use of land and water resources, and a fair marketplace. We're really pleased today to have a number of speakers from DATCP and DPI on to share some great information. We've had over 100 people register for this webinar, and it's just really great to see kind of the response and interest in this as a topic. This event is being recorded, so before we get started, I just wanted to share a few Zoom housekeeping items. We will be sharing the recording on the WFU YouTube channel so that it's easy for you to listen to again and share with others. We will be sending out an email when the recording is uploaded so that you have access to it. We're also very excited to hear from you about any questions that you may have. You can ask the questions by clicking on the Q&A button that's at the bottom of your screen. So again, if you move your mouse around or tap on your screen, you should find a Q&A button and you can submit questions by clicking on it there. And we'll be covering all of the questions at the end of the presentations, at the very end of all of them. Any questions that we're unable to get to during the webinar will be answered afterwards and sent to you along with the recording. So we have a very full list of panelists today and a lot of information to share. So I'm going to get started right away. First up is April Yancer, the Wisconsin Farm to School Coordinator at the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection. So I'm going to turn it over to April and share the slide.
Thank you, Kirsten. It's great to be here. It's wonderful to have so many people here and to be working with my colleagues at DPI to bring farm to school connections to Wisconsin students and Wisconsin producers. Obviously, we are all dealing with supply chain issues, and so we hope that this will help facilitate connections and keep Wisconsin resilient. So thank you for attending, and I'm happy to answer any and all questions at the end of our presentation. Again, I'm April Yancer. I am I'm within the Division of Agricultural Development at DPI, or at DATCP, and I'm in the Economic and Innovation Center running the Farm to School and Institution program. Next. Thank you. This is my team here. We do a lot within the Division of Agricultural Development that includes the Economic and Innovation Center as well as some resource development. Again, this is the Farm to School and Institution program that I'm working through. I work closely with the Something Special from Wisconsin program. We have support specialists who work directly with underserved farmers, providing technical assistance. We have a grant specialist that helps farmers connect to funding. We have a meat specialist who's been working very hard on the meat processing needs for Wisconsin. We have a dairy specialist, and we have a grazing and organic specialist, all within our center. Next. Thank you. The DATCP Farm to School and Institution program was established in 2009 with the Wisconsin Act of 293. This act provided a means for DATCP to hire somebody for my position, as well as allocated or allowed for funding to be allocated for our program. We have no funding for our program, and I'll address that later in the slide. So currently we're just working with one full-time position to help these farm to school connections happen. The Act also provided us with a council. We have a Wisconsin Farm to School Advisory Council, in which people are appointed to by the Secretary of Agriculture, and they work as partners to get information from around the state in different sectors of farm to school to help us, to help guide our program. Next. We currently have quite a few efforts that are addressing the supply chains and trying to make these farm to school connections happen. We sent out a survey to food service directors to better understand the needs and opportunities there. We host marketplace meetings, we provide technical assistance, and we're working with a specialty crop block grant that creates Wisconsin Farm to School minimally processed fruits and vegetables. Next. Thank you. When school started in September, it was pretty quickly that we realized that there was going to be some serious supply chain disruptions, and schools were having a really hard time hitting the ground running because of a variety of problems, from labor issues in production and distribution of food and materials, as well as labor issues within the school kitchens. So it's been a really rocky start. Well, it's been a really rocky school year so far in terms of food service, and we're finding that our food service directors need our support now more than ever. We did send out a survey to try to understand those needs a little bit more clearly, and it seemed like what we were hearing through phone calls and emails held true I'm sorry, we found that held true to what we were hearing. And so our survey really did support the conversations that we've been having, and we've been able to bring that to industry stakeholders. Next. Thank you. So for our audience today, I pulled out this piece of information because I think that this shows kind of, at least at the time that the survey was taken, what the biggest needs were in schools. We found that whole grain products that met school needs was the highest demand that wasn't being met. We also heard a lot of that schools need grab and go items and pre-portioned, pre-packaged items. We did not hear that schools were short on dairy products or liquid milk, but in terms of other proteins, chicken was certainly the highest, followed by beef and then pork. We did find that both canned and fresh fruits and vegetables were in short supply, but easier to come by. Next. One effort that we have been doing over the past year between DATCP and DPI, school nutrition team, is we've been hosting marketplace meetings, and there may be some people on this call who have been attending. These meetings are to bring together suppliers who are already working with school food service and school food service directors that are already engaging in local food procurement. These are open hour, like open office calls, and anybody who is already working in the farm to school procurement area can attend these calls, make connections, meet new people, and try to find their market and supply needs. It's been a really great experience to meet so many school food service directors from around the state and suppliers too. We have the calls are great in that there's new people every meeting, and sometimes there's just handful of people. Sometimes we have up to 50 people on the call, but everybody's there working to really try to figure out the nuts and bolts of getting their local food into their kitchens, or supplying their local food with things that are coming directly from their farms. We have some aggregators and distributors, and sometimes broadline distributors are attending. And so it's just a really wonderful mix to have everybody in our local food supply chain show up for these calls and make connections. Next. In addition to those calls and working with DPI with surveys and understanding the needs of school food service directors, through our Farm to School program, we provide technical assistance. We help assess needs and opportunities for local food businesses. We provide next step resources when businesses are trying to grow. We connect local food supply chain partners to each other. We connect farm to school and institution supply chain projects, and we connect partners to those projects, and we connect agencies and organizational projects and producers. Thank you. Next. One project that we've been working on is a project that DATCP has initiated with a specialty crop block grant. It's called the Wisconsin Farm to School Minimally Processed Fruit and Vegetable Pilot Project. And DATCP is partnering with Midwest Foods to source fruits and vegetables from more Wisconsin producers, send those fruits and vegetables through their processing plant in Kenosha, and provide minimally processed products to Wisconsin schools. In this process, we have added partnering with the Wisconsin Harvest of the Month campaign, and we are aligning that product line with the fruits and vegetables that are promoted through the Wisconsin Harvest of the Month campaign. This has been a really wonderful project to get off the ground, and we've really have been able to dive in to understand what it really takes to get to support a school food service director to get foods into a school, and help their operation shift to that type of procurement. During supply chain disruption, it is really asking a lot for school food service directors to take on a change that doesn't directly impact their immediate needs. So we have had some bumps in the road, but we are building strong relationships in the southeastern region of the state with this project, and we hope to expand it to the southwest region with an upcoming grant. Next. So yes, upcoming opportunities. I did apply for a second round of specialty crop block grant to continue that project. And with this project, we're looking at expanding into the Southwest region with other farm to school partners, continuing our work in the Southeast region, and really looking at strategically organizing our farm to school efforts by regions around the state, supporting those regions' networks and supply chain partners. We also have the opportunity to apply for a USDA Farm to School grant. For those on the call who might be interested in that, that is due, I believe, January 10th, so not much time, but still a window of opportunity to get some funding for your project. We're also looking at the local food assistance purchasing cooperative agreement that's coming out through the USDA. That would bring $4.9 million of funding to Wisconsin state government to support local food purchasing from underserved farmers to communities that are have access issues with local foods, and schools would be potentially one of the recipients of this funding. So there's really an opportunity for schools and food security partners to work together with DATCP to create local food supply chains. This funding won't be awarded until April. So we're currently in the planning process of that, of what that program might look like. And then another opportunity that's on the horizon is that there are 2 bills currently in the Assembly that will impact farm to school. Thank you. Next. And I did really run through the review of this, but so we can skip this slide. We might skip a couple of slides here because I really did just give a brief overview of these things. Yes, we can keep going. Thank you. Here are the Assembly bills. Here are the Assembly bills that you may be interested in. If these are things that you want to support, everybody is able to reach out to their legislators and let them know what their thoughts and considerations are around these bills. The first bill would be a farm to school bill that would bring $400,000 biannually into DATCP to support our farm to school program and to support our local food connections. The other bill is a farm to fork bill, which would allow us to do the same thing, but for daycares and hospitals and college campuses and other institutional buyers that are dealing with needs to access local foods. And then there is also a food security bill that is in the Assembly right now. Thank you. Next. We have 2 additional programs that are not part of our farm to school program, but they're overlapping, and I just want to briefly touch on those. Next. Thank you. The Something Special from Wisconsin is probably a program that people have heard of or seen when they're in the grocery store. This is our state branding and marketing program, and we've learned over this past year that states that do run a state branding, marketing, and program have higher success rates with their farm to school program because it gives a means for people to access, to find their local foods, to identify what their local foods are. In Wisconsin, our farm to school and our state branding programs run separately, but we do overlap. And just recently, Something Special added a tab to their filters that is farm to school and institution. So if you're on this call and you're a Something Special from Wisconsin member and you want to sell to schools, you can add that farm to school and institution tab in your filter. And so when people search farm to school and institution, your business will come up and they can find your product. If there are buyers on this call, that's exactly what you do. You just search in the directory farm to school, and anybody who is selling to schools or wants to sell to schools, who's a Something Special member, will be there. Thank you. Next. And this is a brand new program that's been developing at DATCP. There's been a lot of where I was talking about food safety with produce and what certifications or qualifications a produce vendor may need to have in order to sell into schools. A lot of times we talk about that around GAP certification or non-GAP certification or food safety plans. This is a brand new program that's launching out of DATCP. It's a state program. It's a food safety audit and registration program. It's free. It's available as a resource to support growers, especially small scale growers who maybe don't want to go through the GAP certification process. It is not regulatory in the sense that people will be coming to your farm and inspecting to make sure you qualify. It's really that they offer free inspection and audits so that you can access institutional markets. Thank you. Next. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you. I was a little bit nervous. I'm going to hand it over to Susan.
Thanks so much, April, for all of that great information. And now I am pleased to introduce Susan Bastian-Young, the Nutrition Program Consultant of the School Nutrition Team at the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction.
Thanks, Kirsten. I'm going to work on sharing my screen, but I don't have a lot of experience with that in Zoom. So let's see if I can find what I need here.
And I do have your slides pulled up if you would like me to do it instead.
Well, let's try this, see what we got.
Just thinking about it. While we're waiting, I just want to remind folks that if you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A section, and we'll answer those at the end of all of the presentations.
Kirsten, if you still have audio from me, would you go ahead and share those slides, please?
Yeah, happy to. Okay, does that look good?
Screen's a little frozen. I'm frozen, so I can't see what you all see, but you should have a slide that says Farm to School and Child Nutrition Programs.
We can hear you, great, and I think we're ready to go if you can just tell me where to go on the next.
Think so. All right. All right. Thanks for your patience. So I am Susan Bastian-Young. I'm a member of the school nutrition team, DPI, and we have a big team there. So I'm just one school nutrition consultant, and I happen to be a farm to school specialist. So go ahead and go to the next slide if you would, Kirsten. So at DPI, we administer the USDA child nutrition programs, which most public schools and some public school districts and some private schools choose to participate in. So those are meal programs like the National School Lunch Program, the School Breakfast Program, and schools choose, an important part of that is that schools choose to participate in those child nutrition programs. They're not required to. So when they do operate these programs, they agree to meet numerous program regulations on many different aspects of how and when and to whom they serve these school meals and snacks. So when DPI talks about schools that are in farm to school, those are our stakeholders, and we're referring to schools that are enrolled in these USDA child nutrition programs. So again, that's most schools in Wisconsin, but not all. Go ahead to the next slide if you would. And one more. Those are some additional programs that we're running in this school year, the Seamless Summer Option and the Summer Food Service Program. Those are ways that USDA has developed during the pandemic in order for schools to serve meals free to all students. And then they get reimbursement for the cost of those meals. So next slide, Kirsten. All right. So then within these child nutrition programs that they've elected to be in, how do schools do farm to school? What does it mean? And essentially they do it however they choose. So they're not a farm to school program. There's something doesn't exist that they have to sign up for. There aren't additional regulations within any kind of farm to school program. And so no one tells schools what what activities or events, what related to farm to school they want to do. So farm to school is instead made up of voluntary activities that any school can, or school district can participate in. And they focus on three buckets or bushels of activities, the core elements of farm to school. So one is education, and that really refers to agricultural and nutrition education. The other is procurement. So that is the local purchasing. And the last is school gardens, which really offers students engagement and experiential learning about the other two core elements. So today we're really going to talk about procurement. That's why we're here. But schools make choices about which of these activities or all that they want to participate in and how they do that. So what local foods they want to serve, whether they have a school garden, who manages that garden, and they determine the ways that students are going to benefit from this farm to school programming based on what they're doing. So I don't think I really need to talk with you all about the benefits of farm to school as if I'm trying to convince you that it's a good idea. But I think we can do that if you want. But the reasons why schools participate in farm to school activities is because it reflects their school values and because it makes financial sense for their school meals programs. So in the same way that farmers and producers they're each their own business. They're making decisions for that business based on their values, based on what makes financial sense. So farmers and schools really have that in common with school food service departments. And so these school food service departments are financed through this USDA child nutrition programs. They have a separate, essentially, bank account or ledger, which functions independently from a school or a district's general budget. And I bring that up again, just to kind of get the picture that this is almost like a small business that exists inside a larger business. When you're talking to school food service directors, you're talking often to the manager of that business. So we want to talk more about making connections today to move locally produced foods into schools for their use, particularly in school meals. And again, this local procurement, one element of farm to school. So there's a variety of actions and promotions and lessons and events that schools can participate in with farm to school. And you'll hear some more about those in a little bit with my colleague in AmeriCorps. So schools are in these child nutrition programs that have a lot of regulations, and all the decisions that they make about local foods they might purchase have to meet the regulations of the meal programs that they're serving in. So they can choose to procure local foods for any of those programs, those USDA child nutrition programs that they participate in. Each meal program has a required meal pattern, which determines the components that a school must serve for that meal. So think of the 4 food groups, except here from USDA, there's 5. So these groups are meat or meat alternate, as some of you might think of as protein sources. They are grains, which includes whole grains and products made from whole grains, vegetables, fruit, and the 5th is milk. So this category of milk doesn't actually contain other dairy products. Those would be under the meat alternates. Milk is its own food group in this case. So also within the vegetable food group, there are subgroups that schools need to serve each week. And these vegetable subgroups are classified as red, orange, dark green, beans and peas or legumes, starchy, and then there's an other category. Go ahead and go to the next slide if you would, Kirsten. So that's one commonality among schools and their purchasing, again, for these meal pattern or these meal programs most often. They also all have common serving sizes that they're looking for, the way that they credit or count the meal components, and they plan their menus. So within each of these 5 food groups, there are minimum serving sizes. that schools must serve at each meal. And those serving sizes can be thought of as a basic unit of measurement that food service directors begin with when they're trying to calculate how much of a certain product they need or use. So also, how do food service directors know how foods credit towards or fit into this meal pattern that they are following? So for Whole Foods, that's fairly simple. They have a few tools to do that. For Whole Foods, they can find that in what is called the Food Buying Guide. And for products that are processed, that becomes a little bit more complicated for you as a farmer or for your processor, and that schools would probably need a child nutrition label, which is a very specific thing, or a product formulation statement. And DPI can help with either information about either of those things for folks who are trying to develop products for school meals. Schools most often develop a menu in advance also. They do it because they need to tell their customers, the students, what they're serving, and they need the menu to estimate their costs and their revenues and plan their labor needs. Some create a month-long menu, some create a cycle menu that might be 5 or 6 weeks long, where they're serving 5 weeks, and then they repeat the pattern of those exact same menu items over again. And some, especially right now, might be writing a menu that is only for a week. As April was discussing, with all the supply chain issues that are happening, it's very difficult right now for schools to say, yes, on Tuesday, we will definitely have all of these items in to make this particular meal. So they have to make changes based on their planned menu, depending on what comes into their school, what is delivered that they previously ordered, or if the quality of an item or an item changed, a substitute does not meet their needs, for example. So however flexible they are and however many changes in a menu they want to make or feel forced to make, that can vary greatly from to school. Even in normal years, some food service directors feel more flexible with their menu than others. They're basing that on the fact that they have to please and feed their customers, again, those students. So they know best about what they can change, what they can add to a menu, what they want to introduce in a taste test. Kirsten, go ahead to the next slide if you would. So then there are also some differences in how schools make purchases of local foods. And we're going to talk about the methods in which they can purchase. Some of my colleagues in procurement are going to talk about that in just a bit. But when they're thinking about local purchasing or any food purchasing for their programs, they have differences in the number of meals that are prepared and served each day. So schools and districts in these child nutrition programs, schools and districts practicing farm to school, they may serve as few as 50 students at lunch or as many as 5,000. Based on their school enrollment or their school district enrollment. So this is where that required meal pattern comes into play. Only a school or district can tell you the quantity of product that they need to serve. I would encourage suppliers to not make assumptions about how much of something schools might need. You might feel that you don't have enough to supply a school, but schools can also, they have ways to combine products to make a meal out of more than one source for a butternut squash, for example. So your 25 pounds of winter squash may be just as easily used as 2,500 pounds of butternut squash, or maybe even more easily used because of storage limitations. Another difference between schools is the price that they choose to pay for each product. And again, we'll talk about this more, my procurement colleagues, But I just wanted to point out that schools really determine what is a reasonable cost. They have that experience, and that can depend, that can vary, and it can depend on their circumstances, the way in which they're going to serve the food. So your job is to ask for the price that you need if you're a farmer or producer, and their job is to determine if that's reasonable for their school meals budget. They have a lot of tools to help them determine what is reasonable, their own comparison of competing suppliers, their knowledge of their current budget, and tools like the Agricultural Marketing Services Market News site. So they can determine what is a price they can pay for your product, and you can meet them, or you can't meet them. Sometimes that's how it is. So one other slight difference is that in terms of food safety, schools might have different requirements. They can determine what kind of certification, if any, they require from a farmer or producer, and they can choose whether they require a food safety certification like GAP. They can look into DATCP's new program that is going to help farmers out for getting some of that information. Schools will want to know about what farming practices are, for example. But once a local product enters a school facility, they really treat it like all their other products. They have to apply the same receiving requirements, the same storage requirements, the same safe food handling requirements from these foods as many others. And while there are a few special foods that might have different requirements, like wild game or eggs that are produced, not at a commercial layer, essentially DPI, the school nutrition team, and USDA provide guidance for schools when they're wanting to serve those items from local sources. And USDA's guidance to school food service directors around the food safety of local foods is encouraging and supportive, emphasizing the safety of local foods. And then I would say the last thing is to remember that they're purchasing local foods, again, based on their school values too. Kirsten, you could go on to the next slide. This is a USDA non-discrimination statement. And so for schools that participate in the child nutrition programs, this is the statement and the procedures for any civil rights complaints within a school nutrition program. That is all that I have for you today. So Kirsten, I would ask if I'll stop sharing that. Thank you. But I just, I guess I want to follow up a little bit on the idea about what DPI, how DPI helps with farm to school programs. So we do partner with a lot of different organizations within the state to provide resources for schools and in farm to school, to provide curriculum and training for schools in farm to school, as well as our regular training and communications to all the practitioners of these child nutrition programs. So farm to school, because it's not a program, it can just become a highlight, really, frankly, something wonderful that schools can do for their students when they feel they can. And we are there to support that in any way that we can. So that's a little bit about the child nutrition programs, how they relate to farm to school, and what school food service directors have to think about as they're considering purchasing local foods.
Thank you very much, Susan, for all that information. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Kara Ignasiak, the AmeriCorps Farm to School Program Nutrition Education Consultant at the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction.
Hello, everyone. Like she said, I'm Kara Ignasiak. I work for DPI as a nutrition education consultant, and I oversee the AmeriCorps Farm to School program. Let me get my screen share set up, and I have a fun tool to share with everyone today. Can you see it?
We're
Yes.
seeing, yeah, your slides right now.
Okay, good. Share that. Oops. Present. I always do that. All right. So what is it? The Wisconsin Local Foods Database, and we abbreviate that as LFD for short, since it's kind of a mouthful, is a tool that the AmeriCorps Farm to School program developed to connect schools and local farmers or producers. So just to give you a quick little bit of background, if you're unfamiliar with our program, we are an AmeriCorps funded program. So any year we host anywhere between 14 to 16 different host sites around the state of Wisconsin. They sign up to become a host site, and then we place AmeriCorps members there to help them implement farm to school programming. So every year, roughly half of our host sites are directly in schools. The other half are nonprofits like YMCAs, nonprofit hospitals, extension offices, other nonprofits in the local food scene. So any nonprofits are eligible to apply. And then they can host an AmeriCorps member to help them build up farm to school in their community. So a couple years ago, when the program transferred from DATCP previously to DPI, one of our first members was really interested in finding out a way to sustain farmer relationships from year to year as AmeriCorps members kind of turn over, because typically they serve only 1 to 2 years. And so she really wanted to find a way to keep those relationships sustainable and have all of the information in one place to pass on to the next member. And so she started creating a spreadsheet in a database. And over the years, we realized that this would be a really helpful tool to people outside of our program as well, and a really good way for us to connect local farmers and producers to our school districts and vice versa. So we launched it publicly as a website, free to everyone in 2021. So we're barely even a year old yet with this being public. So we are definitely open to feedback to making sure that this is the most useful tool as possible to everyone. So here is the link to the website, and I'll show you it in a little bit. I'm just going to give you a little bit more on the slides quick. So as I said, it is for local producers to sign up and share their farm business information, and it's free. There's no fee for signing up. You just fill out a questionnaire, including your farm business information, your ordering and delivering preferences, what you have available. All sorts of different things get added into this database. So we can share this with schools, and they can search to find producers in their area if they're looking for local potatoes or apples or meat, whatever it is. They can use this database to quickly find farmers in their area to make that connection, because they're very busy people and they don't always have a lot of time to be doing that research on their own. So we developed this as a tool to make it easier for them. We also have the reverse of that. We have a school nutrition director database that schools can sign up to be a part of, so that farmers or producers, if they have apples available and they're like, I really want to sell this to a school, they can look through the database to find school nutrition directors that are looking for apples. So just the flip-flop of that. So we have our database, and it is sorted by region. We also have a local map that you can use. It's interactive. So I'll show you in a second what that looks like live, but you can click on any of these icons. The green icons are farmers already signed up for the database. Once you click on it, it will bring up a link for you to find where that farm is directly in the database. And then the purple icons are all of the schools interested in local procurement. So farmers can click on that to reach out to the school directly that way. I'm going to show a quick little video. Oh, I don't remember if well, let me just, yeah, okay, my sound should be good. Kirsten, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear it when I hit play? Okay.
In this video, you will learn all about the Wisconsin Local Foods Database website. By the end, you will know how to sign up as a farmer or a school and learn how to use the database. To follow along with this website tour, go to sites.google.com/dpi.wi.gov/WILFD/home. The Wisconsin Local Foods Database is made possible by the AmeriCorps Farm to School program. Let's get started. When you get to the website, this is what it should look like. This database was created so communities can be connected to their local farmers. Here you will see a map where you can locate farm businesses near you. You can expand the map by clicking the icon in the upper right-hand corner of the map. You can also use the upper left-hand icon to sort the map into layers. This includes producers in the database, producers that have worked with the AmeriCorps Farm to School program but are not in the database yet, and schools that are interested in buying local products. As you can see, we need your help, so please add your farm business or school to the database if you are interested. If you are a local farmer, you can click on the Add Farm Information tab and fill out the form that opens in another tab. Entering your information helps schools and families in your region discover your farm business. If you are a school nutrition director, you can click on the Add School Information tab. Entering your information lets local farmers know that you are interested in purchasing local foods for your school. After completing your form, it will be reviewed and added to the database. Farmers can also sign up by going to the Find Farmers page and scrolling towards the bottom where the Add Farm Information tab is located. The farm database, which is for school nutrition directors to find producers, is also located on the Find Farmers page, which includes instructions on how to use it. In this database, you will find the following information about local producers: contact information, location, how to order from them, delivery details, liability insurance, product availability, and their interest in working with the farm to school. First, you can click the gray box with an arrow in the upper right-hand corner of the spreadsheet to expand it. Then you can find the region you live in at the bottom of the spreadsheet to find a list of producers specifically in your area. You can also choose to use the master list to look for producers all over the state. Now you can press Ctrl F on your keyboard and type the name of a product you are looking for. For example, if you are a school food service director interested in purchasing carrots, it will bring you to the list where you can see which producers produce that item. Once you have found a farmer that produces the product you are looking for, you can scroll left and right to learn more information about ordering the product. You can also use the map to access the database. You can click on one of the green icons in the location that you desire, and then click the link on the left, which will open the database where that farmer's information is. Some of the producers that have worked with the AmeriCorps Farm to School program but aren't yet in the database have contact information or the website attached, so you can still reach out if need be. The same goes for the schools on the map. School directors can also sign up by going to the Find Schools page and scrolling towards the bottom where the Add School Information tab is located. There is also a database for producers to find school nutrition directors who are interested in buying local products, which is located on this page. The School Nutrition Director database includes the contact information, location, school demographics, ordering preferences, delivery preferences, farm-to-school details, and products they are interested in. Again, you can click on the gray box with an arrow in the upper right-hand corner to expand the spreadsheet. From here, the database is set up similarly to the farm database. You can Ctrl F to search the product that you have to offer and scroll through the list to see which school nutrition directors are looking for that item. Once you have found a school nutrition director that is searching for the product you have, you can scroll left and right to learn more information about the school to get connected with them. The information will be updated every year to ensure that it stays current. If you want to find out more about this website, you can click on the Learn More page. And if you need further help with anything, you can click on the Contact Us page to find your regional manager and reach out to them. Thanks for watching.
So it should give you a good overview of how to use the database. That same video is listed right on our website if you ever wanted to rewatch it. But just as a refresher on how to, if you're a producer,
In this video,
let me change my slide. There we go. If you want to add your information as a producer, there are two buttons on the website, on the homepage and on the Find a Farmers page. If you scroll down, there is this Add Farm Information button. Again, I just want to emphasize that it's free for you to sign up. Doesn't cost you anything. If you click that button, it's just going to ask you a bunch of questions on a Google form. That will come to us and your information will be added to the database in a couple business days. And as she mentioned in the video, we do try to keep the database up to date. And so each year we will reach out to you asking if there's any updates. And so you can respond just to make sure there's no changes. If you don't respond, your information will get removed. you want to join in at a later day, you definitely can. Just fill out this form again. But we just want to make sure that everybody in the database is responsive and that the information in there is accurate. So same for school nutrition directors, it's on the home page and then on the Find Schools page as well. And coming soon, a fun little fact, the Wisconsin Chili Lunch event and us partnered up. So we were going to be adding this little logo next to any of the producers in our database that has ingredients that would go into Wisconsin Chili Lunch. And so stay tuned for that. That will be coming to the database soon. And before I wrap up here, I want to show you where it is on the DPI homepage as well. I just got to get this little bar out of my way here. So if you go to DPI's school nutrition page under Farm to School, you can find the link to the database in 3 different areas. So if you scroll down, you will find it under Getting Started right here. So that would bring you to the page. You can find it under Serve Local Foods, link there as well. And it's also under Nutrition Education because part of the database asks farmers if they're interested in local procurement or if they're also interested in doing agriculture education. So like farm field trips or presentations in classrooms. So if you're interested in something like that, you can find the database in that section as well. And then just to wrap up here, she did mention our Contact Us page. So each year we select a member from each region of the state to be kind of that point person. So if you're in the region and you have questions about how to join the database or how to get connected to people in your region, you can reach out to that person or you can reach out to me as well. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's a great resource. At this time, I am excited to turn it over to Jessica Oli and Lyra Carnes, USDA Food Procurement Contact Specialist on the school nutrition team at the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction.
Thank you, Kirsten. Let me share my screen here. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, it looks good, Lyra.
All right, thank you. All right, hello, and thank you for inviting us to speak. My name is Lyra Carnes, and with me are Jessica Oli and Randy Jones. Jess and I are procurement contract specialists working at the Department of Public Instruction on the USDA Foods School Nutrition team. Randy Jones is our Assistant Director overseeing our USDA Foods and Procurement Division. We are joining today because schools participating in the USDA meal programs are finding it challenging to receive food and non-food supplies through their established supply channels, especially small schools in rural areas. The goal of our talk is to present an overview of the federal purchasing regulations that schools are required to follow, in hopes that local farmers, processors, distributors, aggregators, and other supply chain partners consider servicing schools. Connecting schools to local suppliers will not only meet immediate needs, but will also build a more resilient supply chain in case of future disruptions, along with supporting our local economy.
Thanks, Lyra. So for today, we want to keep the training short and focused on how schools conduct procurement. This way, you as a contractor or supplier will better understand common questions a school may ask you. First, a school needs to identify their local product needs. Once complete, the school can apply a federally approved procurement method to guide the purchasing process. Most often with local procurement, it's going to be a micro purchase, or during this current market, an emergency purchase due to supply chain challenges. Lastly, we want to help you locate our DPI School Nutrition Local Procurement webpage, where you're encouraged to register in that Wisconsin Local Foods database that Kara mentioned. And this database is an efficient way to connect with schools and list products and services you offer.
All right, as you know, purchasing local goods and services supports surrounding communities and economies, helps the environment, and makes for a safer and more resilient food supply. Many schools are already plan and purchase local foods through prime vendors or bread and milk suppliers. In a normal year, they may expand local menu offerings as able to strengthen local business partnerships for the long term. This year, the supply chain disruptions are challenging food service directors to pivot and source a larger majority of products outside of their normal supply chain. On this slide, there are 5 steps to a school's purchasing process. Step 1 and Step 4 require a school to contact a farmer or supplier for information or pricing. The school starts by conducting market research by simply calling, emailing, or asking questions in person. This is similar to conducting a survey of what is available in the area. During this step, suppliers are encouraged to respond. The school is building a list of possible suppliers who they can reach out to for pricing and future purchasing. The local foods database that Kara mentioned is also a good starting point for a school to find business names and locations. At this time, schools are not buying the product or service. They are just collecting information to create their specifications and define their needs. For example, they may reach out to a few tomato suppliers or farmers to discuss the tomato products available by size, type, organic or non-organic, quantity, and seasons of availability. During the market research process, they may also use the information gathered to help define what local means to them. There is no federal definition of local. A school's definition of local may change seasonally or with a type of product or special event. Local may be defined by a certain number of miles from the school, within the county, the state, or adjacent state. They will need to keep this information or definition in mind when contacting suppliers. So after the research is done and their specifications are set, schools may need to communicate further with suppliers to educate them on their specifications and the unique needs of the child nutrition programs. When the specifications are clearly defined and understood, suppliers will be able to provide comparable pricing. Here is an example of the product specifications a food service director may share with suppliers. A whole beefsteak heirloom tomato or an equivalent slicing tomato. They're looking for a medium size, a 30-pound case with estimated volume to purchase about 15 to 20 cases per week during the growing season. Since a school knows what their definition of local is, they would simply reach out to any suppliers that fit their criteria for local. Any food safety or nutritional requirement that a school wishes to add should be included in the specification. An example may be a food safety practices or procedures, a request to provide a product formulation statement or PFS, or a child nutrition label. Next, the school will need to decide on the procurement method they are going to use based on the estimated value of the purchase or transaction. From there, they will request pricing from the suppliers. Another factor to consider during the request for pricing is transportation costs. Determine if the product will be delivered by the farmer to the school, or does the farmer work with a local distributor to make deliveries, or is the product picked up by the school from the farmer? If you, as a farmer, cannot deliver the product, consider working with a commercial distributor. This way, the school can purchase your product directly from the commercial distributor. This could also make your product more accessible to other schools or customers.
Thanks, Lyra. So there's standards that schools have to follow when purchasing goods and services for operating the food service program. For a school to spend taxpayer dollars from the nonprofit school food service account, or it's often called Fund 50, or it is called Fund 50 in public schools, the school is subject to not only allowable cost guidance, but must also consider general federal procurement regulations. In 2 CFR Part 200 in coordination with the USDA program regulations in 7 CFR, and then any state or local regulations. So let's review the approved and the most flexible local procurement methods that these schools are going to use, especially right now and then into the future when we're beyond the supply chain challenges.
All right, so now the school will determine the method of procurement by estimating the value of the purchase or transaction. They will start by reviewing the approved federal and state procurement methods and the acquisition thresholds. So the micro-purchase method may be used for purchases less than $10,000. When using this non-competitive method, the school may simply call and ask questions or talk to you in person. Recently, USDA released a memo which gives schools the option to increase their micro-purchase threshold up to $50,000. Raising the threshold above $10,000 requires a self-certification process. For small purchase, also known as 3 bids and a buy, it may be used when the estimated contract value is less than $250,000. So a school will use a formal procurement when the estimated value is at or above $250,000 or a lower local threshold. If they plan to conduct a more formal procurement, expect to see a formal, written, or sealed bid. When a school requests pricing for an RFP or IFB, they would define their definition of local as part of their specification they provide. Note that the term geographic preference is used in formal solicitations. It is another way to define local when an SFA or a school wishes to give an advantage to local sellers by assigning points for proposals or reduction in bid price for evaluation purposes. Now let's go over the micro-purchase method and emergency procurement. These are the most flexible methods you will see in local procurement, especially during the supply chain disruptions.
The micro-purchase allows for the most flexibility with local procurements when you're trying to acquire products or services below $10,000 per transaction. SFAs may have a lower or a higher local threshold to keep in mind. When using this method, purchases will be awarded without soliciting competitive price quotes, as long as the price is reasonable. So to determine if a price is reasonable, the school should compare previous purchases of similar items. They may have personal knowledge of the items that they're purchasing, and they should distribute purchases equitably among qualified suppliers to the maximum extent practical. The distribution of transactions among the qualified suppliers can happen either at the time of transaction or over several transactions throughout the school year. So let's look at 3 examples. In example 1, a school could purchase produce from one supplier and then select a different supplier the next time produce needs to be purchased. Each transaction, or we like to think of it as per receipt, so if you think of going to the grocery store and getting a receipt, cannot exceed $10,000. In example 2, the school purchases produce from various suppliers at the same time. Each transaction, or again per receipt, cannot exceed $10,000. An example is a farmer's market where you would do business with multiple vendors in one visit or at one time. In the last example, a school could purchase various types of produce, bananas, apples, tomatoes from supplier A. The supplier then gives them one receipt. The total dollar transaction amount would be under $10,000. the next time the school wants to purchase those various types of produce, if they think the price is reasonable, they should purchase produce from a different supplier, supplier B. The total transaction amount per receipt should still be under $10,000. So there's reasons why a school may want to procure non-competitively by using this micro purchase method. It's because it saves on administrative time and costs. It can assist with unplanned purchases or delivery shortages. It's a really good fit for nominal purchases, and it can address seasonal or local purchases. As always, each time there's a transaction, a school is required to keep documentation to support that purchasing process. So they might ask you for, or they might write down or ask you for their vendor name, a contact method, the name of the person who's providing the price quote, the price that was quoted, the date it was obtained, how long the quote might be good for, and then any receipts or invoices. So no matter what procurement method is used, suppliers must also be responsive and responsible in addition to these requirements.
Thanks, Jess. So now let's talk about emergency procurement. So emergency procurement is one of the non-competitive procurement methods, and it does not have a dollar acquisition threshold. So during the supply chain disruptions, school food service staff can conduct emergency purchases to continue uninterrupted food service operation. This type of purchase is short-term in duration, which means these contracts cannot be renewed for the following school year. So the emergency procurement process can be utilized without DPI or USDA's approval. The school can award the purchase without requesting bids from multiple suppliers. So schools are encouraged to negotiate a reasonable price. Now, when using the emergency procurement, schools are still required to keep documentation. As Jess mentioned, they need to keep contractor or supplier name, the primary contact information and address, the contractor supplier name of person who supplied the pricing, the value of the contract or purchase amount, the description of the product and or service being purchased, and if applicable, the duration of the contract and the reason for emergency. And so once the emergency situation is over and if future purchases are needed, the school will need to follow normal competitive procurement guidelines.
Okay, so some of this is a little bit repetitive of what Susan was sharing, but I think it's slightly different. So I'll continue with this piece. There are 5 required meal components in the school meal programs, including meat alternate, grain, milk, fruit, and vegetables. So school's going to be purchasing with the intent to satisfy one of these meal pattern components. For example, if they purchase peppers for their menued chicken fajita wraps, they're fulfilling a USDA meal pattern requirement to plan a certain serving size of vegetables for that meal, specifically maybe that subgroup of red orange or something like that. The school will need to know the yield of one pepper to assist in forecasting their ordering volume. In order for schools to purchase and menu your food items, the item needs to what we call credit towards one of the meal pattern components in one of 3 ways. And I'm going to reiterate this because Susan mentioned it, and sometimes we get questions surrounding this. But for more unprocessed fresh items, credit using USDA's food buying guide. And if you offer more processed products, you'll need to provide either a product formulation statement or a child nutrition label. Due to supply chain disruptions, schools are finding it difficult to meet these normal meal pattern requirements. Therefore, USDA has provided some meal pattern waivers to support access to nutritious meals while still keeping in mind we need to minimize exposure to COVID-19. So the waivers apply to the National School Lunch Program, breakfast program, and then the Seamless Summer option right now. So schools can request the following waivers for the rest of the school year, which expires on June 30th of 2022. Our public health nutritionists on our school nutrition team will review these requests from schools coming in to waive some of these requirements and let the school know if they're approved or not. So right now they can request, or schools can request, to offer one age or grade group meal pattern to all students. So for example, a K through 8 meal pattern that's served district-wide. They can request waiver for dietary specification for sodium, which in Wisconsin, it will be an automatic approval. The whole grain rich requirement could be waived so that they don't have to serve a minimum whole grain rich of the menu items that they're serving. 1% flavored milk. So right now, actually, just today, we got notification that the congressional flexibility for this has been extended through February 18th of 2022. But after that, schools would have to have an approved waiver from DPI if they're serving 1% flavored milk. And then the milk variety, they could have waived, or vegetable subgroups. So still meeting some of they still have to meet the daily and weekly vegetable portions, but some of those subgroup requirements could be waived. So to learn more about these waivers and crediting requirements, I would encourage you to contact a public health nutritionist on our school nutrition team. And if you have any questions specific to meal pattern, the waivers, that food buying guide, product formulation statement, or child nutrition label, I would encourage you to contact them specifically. And we're going to have a specialist on at the end of this call, Molly Gregory, to help facilitate and answer some of those questions you may have surrounding that.
All right, so that concludes our portion of the presentation. Again, we want to thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedules to understand the purchasing aspects, as schools can also reach out to you as an additional school procurement resource. Feel free to contact our team if you have further questions, or visit our local procurement webpage. And I believe Kristen will now facilitate the question and answer portion of this webinar. And as Jess mentioned, we have a public health nutritionist, Molly Gregory, on the call to assist in answering any more specialized meal pattern, waiver, or crediting questions.
Thanks so much, and a big thank you to all of our panelists and presenters at this time. We have a few questions in from the chat, but also just want to encourage others to continue adding questions to the chat that we can answer right now. We have about 15 minutes or so to do that now. And then if there are any additional ones, I can collect them, make sure that we get those answered and sent out to you at the end. So one of the first questions was, is there a number about how many school districts are currently participating in the Farm to School program?
We don't have an exact number of how many school districts are participating because they're not required to sign up to be in a program or to even share with us what they're doing. So we do have a recent USDA Farm to School census that was taken. It's from the school year 2019. And that indicated that of the schools that answered, schools and districts that answered the census, we have 177 that are practicing farm to school activities at their schools.
Okay, thank you. So Susan, you had mentioned that meal planning happens at different times, or like different kind of timings at different schools. And Lyra and Jess were also kind of talking about like how a school would start contacting a farmer. Does this mean that outreach to farmers happens throughout the year, or is there normally kind of a specific time of the year where a bulk of that communication takes place?
I think that outreach to farmers does happen throughout the year, depending on if there's an event coming up that a school might be interested in participating in, for example, or a special day that they have planned that they want to procure local foods for. But again, within these supply chain issues, much planning gets thrown out the window, because then the reality of what is available to them is very different. So I think at this very point, it's difficult for schools to reach out to individual farmers or producers for local foods because they are having to replace or substitute so many different menu items. So while often menu planning for a school year happens in August, perhaps, or a month before that month of menus, it's happening every day for school food service directors right now.
Okay, thanks. And I think, Randall, did you have a follow-up for that?
Yes, I did. So I just wanted to kind of make a distinction here. I know the question was for farm to school, which is a very critical and very central, program. But part of it also is buying local. And the number of schools that participate in child nutrition programs is around 600 schools. So it is a little larger, and basically there's a lot of room for growth for farm to school. So we encourage all schools to do more there. But in part of this bridging the gap, it's really across all school food service. So we are trying to increase local procurement even outside of the farm to school program. So we're if you have, just trying to make the distinction, this is something a little larger. And if you're a producer or a supplier, there's a lot of opportunity right now for you to work with local schools.
Thanks for that. And Jessica?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that too. I know we're talking mainly about food products, but Leah and I kind of briefly mentioned that we are seeing challenges with non-food items as well. So if we're talking about local procurement, we also are needing help, or schools are needing help with some of those non-food items as well.
Could you give a few examples of what that means?
Yeah, and if Leah or Randy want to jump in, but I'm thinking about paper products or things that they use to package into more individually wrapped containers so that they can properly distribute in a safe manner with COVID-19. So there's quite an increased demand for those products and some challenges receiving those. So.
Okay, thank you. Kara, I think this next question is for you. Somebody is asking, how can another state like South Dakota utilize AmeriCorps Farm to School?
Great question. Our grant specifically is just in Wisconsin, so I'm not necessarily, I can't help place a member in your state. However, I don't know off the top of my head, but Food Corps is another organization very similar to ours. They're also an AmeriCorps program, but they are in 17 different states, I believe. And I don't know if South Dakota is included in that state, but you might want to reach out to them to see if they'd be interested in expanding to your state because they're a national program very similar.
Okay, thank you. So a little bit more, I have a question about kind of emergency procurement and meal plan waivers. So is there, what qualifies, I guess, for an emergency for the emergency procurement? Is that something that's in effect now? And are the guidelines for how long that lasts, on the website, or how do people figure out when, kind of what the timeline is, or how long people can use different emergency procurement methods?
Yeah, so Leah, Randy, if you just want to help me out on this one, but USDA did just come out with a memo, and I can find it relating to emergency procurement. It's a very short Q&A, but my understanding is that emergency procurement can be used specifically to ensure meal service is not disrupted. So being used during the public emergency or the event that doesn't allow time for a competitive procurement process. So I would say that once the public health emergency or crisis is over, or a separate issue being the supply chain issues resolved, then schools would be expected to resume competitive purchasing practices. But I right now it's in effect, and schools can utilize it, through those events that are causing the issues.
Yeah, and the only thing that I would add is that The emergency procurement is a method. It's always there. It's just never been utilized to this extent before. We've never really been in this situation. So even outside of the COVID, the pandemic, outside the supply chain issues, it's always there. We normally we would see it like a freezer breaks down and they have to go out and quickly buy a freezer or something, or meals. Typically, that's where we would normally see emergency procurement being utilized. But today it's being utilized across the board. Just kind of illustrates the situation schools are in right now.
Okay, thank
I
you.
did add, yeah,
Go
sorry, I
ahead.
did add a link to the memo that Jessica mentioned for the emergency procurement if you want to find any more information about it.
Thanks. And kind of related, I guess, with the meal plan waivers, are you seeing a number of those come in the system right now? And do you think that that opens up more opportunities for Wisconsin producers?
I think I'm going to hope that Molly Gregory is on.
Yes.
And yes, thanks, Molly.
Yeah, no problem. Yes. Hi, my name is Molly. I'm a public health nutritionist, and we are approving the meal pattern waivers as they come in. I would say there's in the 400s probably of requests that have come in, and a lot of them are about whole grain rich products because schools just cannot meet 100% of their grains being whole grain rich. And a large handful of them are about milk. For a long time, milk deliveries weren't showing up, or they were getting half of their orders. So to answer the second part of your question, this meal pattern flexibility is very generous, and it does lead to some ability for schools to utilize other methods of procurement and working with farmers.
Thank you, Molly. An additional question that we got in the chat. Could you discuss a little bit more about what the child nutrition labels product formulation statement is, and how a farmer would go about creating one of those, or an example of what that looks like? And maybe if there are any kind of additional resources that can't be shared right now, I can include those in a follow-up email, but someone could talk a little bit more about what kind of that looks like and how a farmer would create one of those.
I'll take that one again. This is Molly. A farmer could find a template for a product formulation statement, and you would choose the template depending on what type of food you're providing. So if it's a meat product that's made into a patty, for example, or if it's if there's vegetable based, if it's grain, which is actually very popular, then you would access our template and determine how much of the product, the menu item, the food ingredient that you were interested in is in the actual product. So if the food ingredient is ground beef in a patty, you would tell us exactly how much ground beef. If the food ingredient in question is whole grain rich flour in your granola bar, or oats in your granola bar, you would have to do some math, to be honest. And instead of explaining it step by step, I would encourage you to reach out personally. But there's templates, instructions, and a staff full of happy and invested people.
Okay, thank you, Molly. I'll be sure to include some of those contact information, maybe so that people can do that outreach. So at this time, I just want to give another really big thank you to all of our panelists and people who are on to answer questions. At this time, I just wanted to give folks who are on one last chance to kind of with any final words or things that you wanted to share up before we ended.
And while we're waiting, I just wanted to kind of clarify or add on to that last question, is that the child nutrition label is different than the product formulation statement. But Molly, could you clarify what the child nutrition statement is and how that differs from product formulation?
Sure. Yeah, the CN label, or child nutrition label, that's admittedly a little bit tougher to acquire because it takes money, and you send your product to USDA to get analyzed, and then they do the math and the science and the weighing of the ingredients to give you, the manufacturer of this product, a stamp of approval that's gold star guaranteed. So in an emergency situation, I don't think that would be a popular option. But we see a lot of really popular big manufacturers using this. Hormel, Jennie-O, Kellogg's, General Mills, those type of people. So I think a product formulation statement is cheaper and more accessible for you to use this school year, to be honest.
Okay, thank you. And Randall?
Yes, and so you were asking like what we might add to this. Well, in addition to growing the farm to school program, what Susan's working on, we definitely that's part of this. But the other part is the local procurement of other things. So maybe you're a farmer and you work with a local processor. We really want to get them involved too. We want to get the big picture, and because not every farmer can sell directly to a school, and so we don't want them to be left out. And that's why we're kind of doing this bridging the gap, so we can capture everybody and also promote more local businesses. And the thing Kara's her team has worked on for listing your school, listing your business, again, it's not just limited to farmers. If you're a local supplier and you work with farmers, please put your information in there as well. Because again, it's a big picture. We're trying to connect all the dots. And this is just kind of the beginning. And we're really excited about all these different partners working together to make this work. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I'll turn it over to April.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say that I'm really excited that we have all these people in the same room together, and that in Kara's presentation on the local database slide, it shows a regional map, a map of Wisconsin broken into 9 regions. And I believe that map aligns with the Wisconsin Farmers Union map. So if you are part of the Wisconsin Farmers Union, you'll have a chapter coordinator who will also align in that same region with the AmeriCorps manager. So those are really nice connections to be making. And as Susan and I have been working through the marketplace meetings, and I can see some of the people from the marketplace meetings are on this call, we're realizing that, we realized it before, but it's just emphasizing it, that there's so much work to do, and there are so many partners, and there are so many ways to connect supply chains. So I have a vision of hosting continual calls in some way per region and working with regional partners, and somehow figuring out how DATCP's Farm to School program can support regional farm to school partnerships and supply chains in all 9 regions and tribal areas in the state, because there's so much work and finding those connections on a state level when you probably already know it in your region, but I don't. So, so it would be great for me to connect with people in each region so that I'm more informed about needs and opportunities around the state, and that we can provide more specific supports for each region to make sure these connections are happening and everybody has access to farm to school and the benefits of farm to school and the marketplace. So I know Randy is making some distinctions between farm to school procurement or farm to school programming, or maybe not programming is the right word, but farm to school and what that is, and what local food procurement is. And there's some overlap from a producer end or a supplier end, but we try to keep that distinction to have some preservation of what really is holistic in farm to school in terms of it's a much bigger practice, and local food procurement is one component, and it includes a lot of fold-in terms of connection and education. But we're really working to take a closer look at how these supply chains develop, how all of us in organizations and agencies can partner on this, and really what our suppliers and producers and school food service directors need from us to make this happen. So I really appreciate the Wisconsin Farmers Union hosting us and allowing us to start this conversation in a larger venue.
Thank you, April. It was a really great summary, and also looking forward to help continue to coordinate these discussions. Molly, did you have something else that you wanted to add?
I did. I thought of some potentially good news and a nice way to end. You do not need a product formulation statement if you are providing food items that are singular ingredients. So apples, peppers, potatoes, that does not require a product formulation statement. It's when you take one raw ingredient and combine other things so that it's no longer, perfectly recognizable as that core ingredient, like ground beef to a hamburger patty. So that, I hope that inspires you to keep your relationships and connections going, and don't let this paperwork that you might not need prevent you from moving forward.
Thank you, Molly, for that clarification and sharing that. It's great. Well, we are just right at 1:30, so I'm gonna wrap up now. But again, just a really big thank you to our panelists and to everybody on the call today for joining today and being part of this discussion. Again, we look forward to continuing this discussion with you. You will get a recording and some more additional resources after once we have that pulled together. And again, thank you to all for being here, and look forward to continuing this discussion with you at a future time. Thank you.